Welcome to our audience with CCS. This conversation is part of a Lance Hiley report on small cell backhaul that gives an update on the small cell backhaul solutions available today and the evolution of mobile operators' requirements. My name is Lance Hiley. I'm here on behalf of Lance Hiley, and I'm joined today by Steve Greaves, co-founder and CEO of CCS, which was founded by the same team that started Adaptive Broadband Corporation and Cambridge Broadband Networks Limited. CCS is looking to bring to market a small form factor backhaul solution that's self-organizing, addressing many of the challenges currently being discussed in small cell backhaul forums. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Steve. And Steve, perhaps you could start off by just explaining the background of your company and the product that you're trying to bring to market.
Yes, hi Lance. We started the company in 2010, myself and my co-founder John Porter. As you pointed out, we've co-founded Adaptive Broadband and Cambridge Broadband previously, and originally we're out of the ATT/Carl Laboratories in Cambridge under Andy Hopper. We started looking at this market space, as I say, in 2010, and one of the first things that we did, instead of developing the technology and taking that to the market, we asked the market what is the right technology to develop. So we spent a lot of time in the early days with operators in the UK, operators in the US, operators in Asia, just finding out what exactly it was they saw as a problem going forward, and that focused on particularly on small cells. I mean, they came up with quite quickly with the problem of small cell, and particularly small cell backhaul. So bear in mind this was 2010. So we went away and we looked at the possible solutions, possible ways of creating small cell backhaul. And by backhaul we mean microwave backhaul. And that's how we developed the product that we have now. Okay.
Thanks, Steve. Would you say that the solution that you're designing is designed for urban metro environments, or are you looking to roll something out that can address small cells in rural environments as well? Because a lot of operators have said that they see small cells as being a way of providing mobile broadband coverage to underserved communities.
Yes. Yes, so we predominantly, I mean, looking at our solution, we originally looked at the problem. The problem was definitely a dense urban problem that we set out to address. And we addressed that by looking at the types of technology and to determine that the best way to deploy would be a small cell backhaul system that was a many point to many point. So we needed high capacity, low latency. We have 450 megabits, 125 microsecond latency, and that's how we really started thinking. But recently we've been asked to look at less dense urban environments, such as suburban, and our system will also run in a point-to-multipoint mode. So generically, it's a multi-point system. So we do see primarily the big market being dense urban small cell backhaul, but we do have capability to deal with semi-urban, longer range small cells, or even lightly loaded macro base stations with a point-to-multipoint type strategy.
If you're going to be able to cover both dense urban and lesser dense urban like suburban environments, as you mentioned, what spectrum bands will you be using to provide the solution to cover both of those scenarios, or will you be using a variety of bands?
We originally looked at the requirements of dense urban and also to some degree suburban. It's really area-based, so you want to be able to deploy small cells in a very quick way, and also this is true of macros actually. You want to deploy them in a very quick way, so you don't want to be deploying licenses for every link. So what you have to do is you have to find a spectrum that has the attribute of being able to be deployed in very quickly. And the bands that we're working are predominantly higher microwave bands, 26, 28, 32, and 42. Our initial offering is in 28 gigahertz. And the nice thing about these frequency bands is that they are area-based. So you go to the operator, you purchase a license for your geographic region, and that's once you have that, you can do what you want. So that works very well for small cells, because small cells you can have a lot more deployment activity than you say with a conventional macro type base station deployment. But it also works as well for longer range deployments, such as suburban. So the idea is you keep the operator out of your hair, basically, and then you can just continually deploy as you wish. So The initial bands we looked at were 28, and as I say, we will look at other bands in these areas. We did initially look at things like 60 gigahertz. We like the attributes of 60 gigahertz, particularly being unlicensed, particularly having high capacity, low latency. We found some issues. We felt there'd be some issues with deployment. I mean, our system is really focused on the total cost of ownership rather than optimizing on a link-by-link basis. So we feel that the attribute of the 28 gigahertz bands being area-based means we can build a radio-based system that has a nice, easy-to-install feel about the whole thing. We also looked at sub-6, and predominantly when we think of sub-6, we think of unlicensed, kind of 5 gig, but there are other bands there that are of interest. But again, what we felt with sub-6 is that they have a very nice attribute of being very easy to install. You know, you turn up, switch them on, and they work. But there are potential issues with performance and interference, and they have to be managed in a very, very careful way if you want to optimize the network. And managing in a very, very careful way implies time, implies OPEX. So what we've tried to do is merge both technologies, both best attributes of both technologies, the ease of install of the sub-6 and the high capacity, low latency of the higher bands, and create a solution that sits somewhere in the middle. So we have high capacity, low latency, but the key to our system is that you turn up, install it, switch it on, and it works. And how we achieve that is really the concept of self-organization. Self-organization, from our point of view, means no frequency planning, ease of installation, ease of growth of network, and scalability. And that's really the focus and why we chose this particular frequency band.
Okay. I guess the thing that sort of jumps out at me when you talk about using microwave spectrum in the, say for example 28 gigahertz range, is that that's very much a line of sight spectrum. And so how are you actually building a self-organizing multi-point network that's operating on a line of sight basis in a dense urban environment? And why do you feel that that's a better approach than some of the other approaches that are being put forward by wireless backhaul vendors today?
Okay, so it's essentially builds a mesh type architecture. So we would like to have line of sight between at least one lamppost or two lampposts. So wherever a small cell can see another small cell, then we have a line of sight connectivity. When we looked at the types of deployment scenarios for dense urban small cells, we rapidly realized that the actual ranges that people were talking about were anything from 400 meters down to as low as 50 meters. And in fact, when you're at street level, actually getting line of sight beyond that is quite difficult. There are a number of maybe particular deployments where you can see further than that, but the majority of deployments are really short range. So obtaining line of sight between lampposts or street furniture is actually quite simple if you can build a network that can adapt and route around these objects. So our first premise was really that our system will be deployed such that we could be a multiplicity of redundant paths that would effectively route round non-line of sight objects. So the mesh itself provides non-line of sight capability by having short hops that are individual line of sight. That was the first thing. But secondly, we've also discovered, and this is quite recently, that we do actually work with bouncers as well. So we've done a number of trials where our network's adopted to a reflected path rather than a direct path. So there is some scope for what we might call near line of sight or reflected line of sight, effectively. We're not really saying that we have deep non-line of sight capability, which is strongly diffracted, because that requires quite a big link budget to do that, quite a lot of power in your system to do that. So we are actively investigating some non-line of sight techniques techniques will be normally associated with line of sight, but predominantly we would like to see a line of sight link between a small cell backhaul point to another small cell backhaul point. And as I say, we build up non-line of sight capabilities by effectively routing around obstacles. And in fact, if I step back and look at the current non-line of sight systems that are running, or the Wi-Fi based systems that are running at high performance, and they tend to be deployed in that mode anyway. They effectively build up line of sight links and route around in the same way we're talking about. To actually achieve true non-line of sight capability, deep non-line of sight capability, requires a large link margin, effectively, and it's very difficult to have non-line of sight capability, and also high capacity, low latency. Those two are quite difficult things to achieve. So what we've said is, okay, we'll achieve it, but we'll do it in this particular way. We'll assume we have a line of sight or some bounce line of sight, but we will focus on delivering a high capacity individual link. So we have the capability of a microwave link, but the deployable ease of a non-line of sight system. And really, that's what that's the approach we've taken.
Okay. I mean, that sounds very sophisticated. I mean, you're talking about a meshing network, self-organizing, lots of nodes which are working on a point-to-point or a point-to-multipoint line of sight basis. Surely that's going to be difficult to install into a line.
No, again, sort of one of the attributes, the nice attributes of 28 gigahertz is you can build a system that requires minimum alignment. So, and that's simply because you have a higher link budget, so you can have sort of antenna arrangements that don't require a focused alignment. And one of our driving principles behind this has to be installed by semi-skilled people. So it doesn't matter if somebody installs it and it's slightly misaligned. I've got one of the units here. So if we put one of these things up and it's kind of slightly off or skewed slightly, it doesn't make any difference. We've got 270 degrees coverage on this thing, and effectively it can be installed by anybody with no alignment, because we feel that side of it, the time to install a particular unit multiplied by the thousands that we'll be looking at in the future is really has to be managed. So we aim to have ease of alignment. In fact, our system is now being deployed by council electricians in about 30 minutes. That's 30 minutes from turning up at the lamppost with their cherry picker, raising the cherry picker, installing the unit, powering the unit up, switching it on. It all comes up. It's aligned with the system within 30 minutes. So we're actually delivering now on what we originally viewed the system should be able to do, and that's caused quite a good reaction from the operators that we've been working with. So that is really it. The key thing is that you have to be able, people to install this in a quick manner with no radio planning, no frequency planning. Just turn up and do this, because the alternative is a huge round of radio planning with expensive databases, deployment, handcrafting the network, moving things around, and then reiterating that whole cycle till it works. And then when you want to reinstall a small cell or add to the network, you have to do the whole thing again. So definitely, it sounds complicated, and it is complicated. The sort of software that sits over it is very complicated. But the whole aim of it is to make it very easy for the operator.
No, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense, because as you say, it's, you've got 270 degrees of coverage. I assume you've got a certain amount of beam width as well that makes it a little bit easier in terms of, where you position it on the lamppost as well. If you're using relatively unskilled people to install the systems, literally just plug it in, that must have a pretty good knock-on effect as far as the capex is concerned, and what it costs to install. What kind of other financial benefits would you say that your architecture and your system approach would bring an operator?
Well, first thing, just in terms of stepping back to talk about the capex, one of the things that we did from a very early stage is we viewed this as a volume product. I mean, conventional microwave may do 1 million units a year. We said this is going to be bigger than that, so we have to be able to get to a certain cost point. So we have to think about what we put into the unit from day one. So we had conversations very early on with radio component vendors, silicon vendors, saying, look, this is where we need to get to. This is the product. This is the market space. And they had to convince us that they could get to the volume pricing we wanted before we put the components in. That's very different to what we've done in the past. In the past we've been technologists and put the best in and said we'll get cost out later. And ultimately that's a hard thing to do. So we made it hard on ourselves from day one. We made it hard on ourselves in terms of we've got this very complicated requirement, and we've managed to achieve it on a limited, skinny hardware budget. But now that's getting better. That's 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Components are getting better. Component costs are getting cheaper. So capex point of view, we worked very hard to make sure that we could get this into a volume product. So capex, we know where we're going with that. In terms of the installation, clearly there are a number of things. First and foremost, as all operators talk about, is that it has to be easy to install. You know, we've not invented this concept of self-organization. This is where the RANs are going. So we borrowed from the RAN technology and said, look, if these guys need to do it, we need to do it, because ultimately maybe 1-to-1 ratio with these small cells. So that's what we did. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, we talked earlier about keeping out of the regulators here by using area-based licensing. But if you're not very, very careful, you can get into the hair of the planning department, okay, the council planning department, and they can be even more difficult. So one of the things that we did right at the very start again was go and talk to owners of infrastructure, council, and say, well, if we were to put this type of equipment on your infrastructure, you know, what would it have to look like? And of course, we start with this size. Well, as a technologist, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the reason it has to be small is that, you know, if you go to places like Westminster, they don't want a lot of infrastructure on their lampposts. So we worked very hard to get this this unit to the right form factor, such that we could go to councils and get this term de minimis. So we view, you know, the fact of life is that you will have probably one unit for backhaul and one small cell. If you want to put multiple units on there, you're going to have a really, really hard time, and that's going to cause delay in your rollout, and it's going to add to your general capex and ultimately your opex. So ease of installation from a technical point of view, but also enabling your system to be deployed without having to wait 6 months in planning is also very important, and ultimately cost as well. So they're the three key things we think we bring to an operator. Really, initial capex, and then longer term, a real reduction in opex and time to market, installation time.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, in the context, you know, you talked about the evolution of the product getting smaller and smaller. I mean, what sort of things can we look forward to in the future from CCS? Do you see your product becoming smaller, being integrated with the small cell itself, anything like that?
Well, there's a number of, so we imagine that longer term there will be a decision made to integrate, but at the moment the operators are telling us that's not required. It's not required. A, because they don't have a small cell strategy, they don't know which particular small cells they're working with, they're not sure on the backhaul strategy, but ultimately I'm sure that will happen, the integration will take place. Whether that's probably not CCS integrating Ericsson equipment, it's probably the other way around, you know, because it's a bigger problem. But I think at some stage there will be integration. But from our perspective, you know, we continue to look at our system. This is quite small, and really it's actually smaller than it should be for the frequency. So I think there's certain rules of physics that we have to adopt, you know, adhere to in terms of design of these things. But certainly in capacity, this is a 450 megabit system. We have a capability to put a dual unit, a second unit, which gives us another 450 megabits in the same spectrum. So it's a 900 megabit system. We will look to integrate those when we have the component costs down. So we'll have a higher capacity unit, and we can look at more sophisticated ways of increasing capacity with the same spectrum. So that's one thing. Obviously, frequency is of great interest. Certainly, we talked about 26, 28, 32, 42. There's about 6.5 gigahertz of spectrum around the world that's, you know, mandated for use in this area, but very lightly used. So that's, you know, that's a good area to move in. So capacity, I think, in terms of capacity, and also different frequency bands, and possibly longer-term integration, maybe with a non-line of sight technology, maybe a kind of sub-6 technology as well. These are all things that are all possible for a team like ourselves. But our key focus at the moment is really just making sure this system is functioning as we say it functions, and moving from the phase we're at now, which is really kind of commercial pilots, through to commercial stages. And I would say we've got sufficient interest in this product to keep us going for a little while.
Well, that's great, Stephen. Thank you very much. Your comments and observations will be a great contribution to this Sense of Healy report. And just to remind everyone, this report will be accompanied by in-depth interviews, much like this, from a variety of leading vendors working in the backhaul area. The report will be available to be downloaded free from the Sense of Healy website at senseofhealyconsulting.com. So with that, I'd like to thank Steve Greaves from CCS again for his contribution today, and we look forward to hearing about many more exciting developments from your company. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Lance.